My name is Mohammed Ahmed, an ex-Muslim. I was born and raised in Kuwait, in a family that strictly adhered to the traditions of Islam. In this video, I want to tell you something that completely changed my life. My father was a respected Imam, a man whose influence was felt deeply in our community. From a young age, I was taught the teachings of the Quran and expected to live by its principles. I was the obedient son, always the one to recite prayers and follow the rituals. But beneath the surface, something wasn't right. Despite doing everything I was told, I felt a void inside me. There was a peace everyone around me seemed to have, but I couldn't find it, no matter how hard I tried. For years, I ignored that feeling, thinking it was just a part of life I had to accept. But the silence of that emptiness grew louder and louder, until I could no longer push it away. It was during my time at university that things began to change. One of my professors, a kind woman named Miss Lydia, gave me a small gift that would turn my world upside down: a Bible. She didn't explain much, but she handed it to me with a quiet smile, as if she knew something I didn't. The small, unassuming book felt heavy in my hands, and I immediately felt a mixture of fear and curiosity. I knew I couldn't let anyone see me with it, especially not my father. At night, in the safety of my room, I opened the Bible. I read the words in secret, my heart racing with every page I turned. The fear of being caught was real, but the more I read, the less that fear mattered. What I found in those pages was something I had never been taught, something that made sense in a way nothing else ever had. Jesus was not just a distant prophet to me anymore. He was a person who cared, who healed, and who loved unconditionally. For the next few months, I lived in a state of constant fear. During the day, I was the perfect son, the good Muslim, performing my duties without question. But at night, in the quiet of my room, it was Jesus I spoke to. I began to memorize the verses that comforted me, feeling something inside me shift. I wasn't just curious about the words. I was falling in love with the person they spoke of. But living this secret life could not last forever. One afternoon, everything changed. I was sitting in my room, reading the Gospel of John, when my father walked in. His eyes immediately locked on the book in my hands. The shock and anger in his eyes were instant. The silence was deafening as he pulled the pillow off my bed and found the Bible. Without a word, he grabbed me by the arm. The first slap hit me so hard I stumbled. My mouth filled with blood, but it didn't stop there. The second slap knocked me to the floor. The words I tried to say, to explain myself, died in my throat as my father and my uncle exchanged grim glances. They weren't going to punish me in any normal way, they were going to erase me. I was no longer their son, no longer part of the family in their eyes. I was a traitor. They dragged me to the car, my brothers surrounding me like guards watching over a prisoner. I didn't dare speak, and we drove in silence. I watched Kuwait disappear through the rearview mirror, knowing that I was being taken to a place where I would likely never return from. We headed out into the desert, and with every passing minute, my heart sank further. The heat of the sun and the endless stretches of sand seemed to swallow everything else. The city, the noise, the life I knew, all were gone. We stopped, and my father looked at me with eyes so cold, I barely recognized him. Without a word, he handed me a shovel. "You're going to dig your own grave," he said. At that moment I knew. This was it. There was no turning back. I grabbed the shovel with shaking hands, the weight of it far heavier than it should have been. My legs trembled beneath me, and I tried to steady myself, but there was no escaping what was about to happen. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the dry desert air seemed to suffocate me as I started to dig. The sand beneath my feet shifted with each motion, but no matter how much I dug, the ground felt unforgiving, as though it wanted to swallow me whole. My father stood nearby, silent, watching me with a cold gaze. My uncle remained still, not a word between them. My brothers didn't even glance in my direction. It was as if I had ceased to exist for them, no longer part of the family, just a burden they had to erase. The weight of their silence was worse than any of their harsh words. The shovel hit something hard, a dull thud echoing in the emptiness around us. I wanted to stop, to rest, but there was no mercy. I had to keep digging, the sweat from my brow mixing with the dirt on my face. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. Every inch of ground I broke felt like it was breaking me inside as well. As I dug deeper, my mind raced, but I couldn't push away the reality of what was happening. My father's voice echoed in my head, cold and unforgiving. "You are a traitor. You have shamed us." The words haunted me, and I wondered how everything had come to this. I never asked to be born into this life, never asked for this fate. All I had done was find something that gave me peace, something that made me feel understood in a way I never had before. But now, the price for that peace was this grave I was digging for myself. The hole grew larger, deeper. My hands were raw, blistered from the effort. My arms ached, and my breath came in ragged gasps. But it didn't matter. I had no choice but to continue, or the punishment would be worse. My father stood motionless, not even looking at me. The emptiness between us felt like it stretched for miles. Was this how it would end, I thought? Was this the price of faith? I looked around, at the dry desert, the wind kicking up dust and sand. There were no sounds of life here, no birds, no cars, nothing. Just the howling wind and the silence of the desert. The place where they would bury me was nothing more than an empty patch of land, just like the empty space inside me. When the hole was deep enough, I collapsed to my knees. I was dizzy, exhausted. The weight of the sand, the weight of my family's betrayal, pressed down on me with a force I couldn't fight. My heart raced, but my body was too weak to run, to escape. I looked up at my father, who stood there, stone-faced, as though he had already buried me in his heart long before this moment. And then, my father did something that made my blood run cold. He approached, holding the Bible I had been reading, the book that had condemned me in his eyes. He didn't speak. Instead, he dropped it into the hole beside me. The pages fluttered, hitting the sand with a sound that echoed in my mind. "You wanted this," he said, his voice emotionless. "Die with it." The words hung in the air as my body trembled, not from the cold, but from the horror of what was happening. The first mound of sand hit me, and I gasped, trying to breathe, but the weight was suffocating. It was dry and heavy, pressing down on me, covering my face. I tried to move, to raise my hands to stop it, but I was too weak. More sand poured in, filling the space around me, suffocating me bit by bit. I thought of Jesus, of the love I had found in his words, even if I could never say them aloud. "Jesus, find me here," I whispered in the darkness. It wasn't a prayer for escape, but for mercy. Mercy from the suffocating weight, mercy from the family who had betrayed me, mercy from the life that had been forced upon me. The sand kept falling, and my breath became more and more shallow. My vision blurred, the darkness closing in on me. I couldn't feel my limbs anymore, couldn't move, couldn't think. The weight of the world pressed down on me, and all I could do was wait. Wait for the end, or for something, anything to happen. And then, in that moment of total despair, something changed. A light, not a light in the physical sense, but a presence. It wasn't like anything I had ever felt before. It wasn't the light of the sun, nor the light of any human comfort. It was something deeper, something inside of me. The weight on my chest didn't matter anymore. I wasn't alone. In the midst of the suffocating darkness, I heard a voice. It wasn't audible, but it resonated in my entire being. "You are not alone." The light, the peace it surrounded me, filled me in a way I couldn't explain. My body still felt the weight of the sand, but I wasn't afraid. I wasn't suffocating anymore. I felt someone enter the grave with me. Jesus, the one I had read about in secret, was there with me, in that moment, in the darkness. I don't know how long I lay there, but I know I wasn't alone. There was no judgment in his eyes, only love, only compassion. The fear, the pain, it all faded into the background as his presence filled the space around me. I wasn't going to die in that grave. I was going to live. And in that moment, I knew that something had changed within me. I could feel it, a new life, a new beginning, even as the world above me remained silent. The weight of the sand continued to bury me, but inside, something had shifted. It was as though my body was still trapped in that grave, but my soul had been lifted somewhere far beyond it. I couldn't explain what was happening. I had no words for it. I only knew that I wasn't alone. The presence that surrounded me was not the warmth of sunlight or the comfort of another human being. It was something deeper, something that could not be touched by the hands that had buried me. In that grave, surrounded by darkness and silence, I felt a peace I had never known before. It wasn't the peace of being free from my father's anger, or from the oppressive expectations of my family. It was the peace of knowing that I was loved, deeply and completely, by someone who saw me not as a traitor, but as a child. I don't know how long I lay there, suffocating under the sand, but the time didn't matter. What mattered was the light, the overwhelming presence of love and compassion that enveloped me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel abandoned. I felt seen. I felt understood. The darkness around me began to recede, not because the sand had stopped falling, but because something within me had changed. I didn't need to breathe. I didn't need to escape. I was no longer tethered to the body that lay in that grave, struggling for air. I was above it, free from the weight that had held me down for so long. The fear that had consumed me for years, the fear of my family's wrath, the fear of being buried alive for my faith, none of it mattered now. It was as if the grave, the very place my father had sentenced me to die, had become the place where I was reborn. I closed my eyes, not in fear, but in peace. The first words I whispered in that grave were not cries for help, but a simple prayer. Jesus, if you are real, don't let me die like this. And in that moment, I knew he was there, with me in the darkness. It wasn't just the grave that I felt, but a presence that reached into the depths of my soul and whispered that I was not alone. The light inside me grew stronger. I wasn't sure if it was the light of heaven or just a flicker of my own heart, but it was real. And as the darkness slowly receded, I felt a warmth, a peace, unlike anything I had ever known. I wasn't buried to die. I was buried to be born again. As the sand continued to fall, I didn't feel the weight anymore. I didn't feel the suffocating pressure. It was as though I was floating above it, looking down at the body that had been buried in that hole. I saw my father, his face cold and unreadable, as he walked away with my uncle. My brothers were silent, not looking back. They had left me there, in that grave, without a second thought. But I didn't feel the anger that should have filled me. I didn't feel the resentment that I had expected. Instead, I felt something else, something I couldn't explain. It was as if I was seeing them from a distance, as if I had transcended the anger, the hatred, and the hurt. And then, in that moment, I knew I was being given a choice. A choice to go back or to stay. The light, the presence, the peace, it was offering me freedom, but it wasn't freedom from the grave. It was freedom from everything that had kept me in bondage for so long. It was freedom to choose love over hatred, peace over violence, forgiveness over anger. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to face the pain again, the loss, the trauma of what I had just endured. But something in me knew that if I didn't go back, I wouldn't be able to help anyone else. If I didn't go back, the message that had been given to me, the message of grace and mercy, would never reach the people who needed to hear it the most. That night, as I lay on the floor of the tent, the only light coming from the flickering fire outside, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The grave. My family's rejection. The love and peace I had felt in the darkness. And most of all, the choice I had made not to stay in the grave, not to give up, but to keep moving forward. I knew that what had happened to me wasn't just a story of survival. It was a story of faith in something greater than the suffering, something greater than the darkness. I knew that I wasn't here by my own strength. I had been carried by something, someone, that I couldn't explain. But I knew it was real. The next morning, Sofiat gave me food and offered to help me get out of the desert. She said I could stay with her family for as long as I needed. But I knew I couldn't stay forever. I needed to leave Kuwait, to find a way to truly live. The thought of leaving was terrifying, but I also knew it was the only way to truly escape the past and start anew. As I prepared to leave the camp, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude toward the people who had helped me. They didn't know my story, they didn't know who I was, but they had given me something I hadn't had in years, a chance. The road ahead was uncertain. I didn't know what the future held or where I would go next. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone anymore. And no matter where I went, I would carry the light I had found, the peace I had discovered, and the love that would never leave me again. As I left Sofiat's camp, I carried with me more than just the clothes on my back. I carried a renewed sense of purpose, something that had been missing for so long, something that had been given to me in the depths of that grave. I had survived, not by my own strength, but through something greater than myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of direction. The desert was vast, and the road ahead was unclear, but my heart no longer felt like it was drowning. I wasn't sure where I would go next, or what I would do, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to leave Kuwait. I had to leave the life that had bound me in chains of fear and control. I had to escape my family, my past, and the suffocating expectations placed upon me. But as I made my way from Sofiat's tent, the question of where to go lingered in my mind. I couldn't go back to the city. The family I had known, my father, my brothers, had erased me from their lives. To them, I no longer existed. And yet, part of me still longed for the people I had known, for the love that I had once shared with them. The memories of my father's stern yet loving face, of my mother's gentle voice, and of the life I had left behind, it all weighed heavily on me. I couldn't understand how everything had changed so quickly. One moment, I was the dutiful son, living a life according to tradition. The next, I was buried alive for the one thing I had ever done for myself. My faith. But it wasn't just the faith that had made me an outcast. It was the truth I had found in that faith, the truth that Jesus had shown me in my most desperate hour. The truth that love, grace, and mercy were greater than fear, than anger, and than the constraints of family and tradition. That was the truth that had set me free. And it was a truth I couldn't keep to myself. As I walked through the desert, I realized that my escape was not just from Kuwait, but from the lie I had been living. I had been pretending for so long, pretending to be someone I wasn't, pretending to believe in a faith that didn't fill the emptiness inside me. And now, I was free to live the truth no matter the cost. After several days of walking, my legs were sore, my body weak from the harsh conditions. I had no plan, no clear direction. But I knew I couldn't stop. The fear of being caught, the fear of being dragged back to my family, still gnawed at me. I couldn't afford to stop now. Then, one day, as I stumbled through the desert, I saw something that made my heart race, a small village on the horizon. It was faint, barely visible in the distance, but it was enough to give me hope. I pushed myself harder, my breath coming in short gasps, my body burning with exhaustion, but I kept going. I had to reach that village. I had to find someone, anyone, who could help me escape. When I finally reached the village, I collapsed in the first shelter I could find. A woman appeared, her eyes full of concern, and helped me into her home. She offered me food and water, and I could see the kindness in her eyes. Her name was Nadia, and though she spoke a language I didn't fully understand, I could feel the warmth and the compassion in her voice. She took me in without asking questions, without wanting to know my story. She gave me a place to rest, a place where I didn't have to hide anymore. And for the first time since I had left my family, I felt a small glimmer of peace. But I knew this was only temporary. The danger of staying in one place for too long still loomed over me. I couldn't stay hidden forever. I had to keep moving. Over the next few days, Nadia gave me all the help she could. She knew someone who could help me escape Kuwait, a network of people who had assisted others in getting out. Nadia wasn't sure if it would work, but she was willing to try. And so, with Nadia's help, I began to make plans for my escape. But it wasn't just about fleeing anymore. It wasn't just about getting away from my family or the life I had left behind. It was about finding a new purpose, a new life, one that was rooted in truth and faith, a life that I could live without fear. I knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles, there would be risks, and there would be times when I would want to give up. But I also knew that no matter where I went, no matter what happened, I would carry with me the truth I had found in that desert grave. The truth that no matter how deep the hole, no matter how heavy the burden, no one is too far gone for Jesus to find. He had found me, even in the grave. And now, I would find others who needed to hear that same message of hope. Days passed in a blur as I prepared for my escape. Every moment was filled with tension, and yet there was an underlying sense of determination I had never felt before. Nadia, a stranger just days ago, had become my lifeline. She didn't ask why I needed to leave Kuwait, nor did she question the story I had woven. She simply helped me because, as she said, some things are just meant to be done. We arranged everything with care. Nadia introduced me to a man named Amir, a contact who had helped many others escape. Amir didn't speak much, but his eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen too much suffering in his lifetime. He gave me a false identity, a new name, a new past. I became a different person overnight. Jessa Marisol, a Filipino domestic worker seeking a better life. I felt both fear and relief in equal measure. On one hand, I had the chance to escape, to leave everything behind and build a life somewhere far from the memories of my father's betrayal, the burning shame, and the grave where I had nearly lost my life. On the other hand, I was scared. I was scared of what the future held, of being caught, of living in constant hiding. I would be starting from nothing, with no family, no home, and no clear future. The days leading up to my departure felt like a strange, surreal limbo. I moved from place to place, from one temporary shelter to the next. I couldn't stay in one place for too long, and every time I heard a car drive by or someone knock at the door, my heart would race. I was always looking over my shoulder, wondering if my father's influence had reached this far, wondering if someone would come to drag me back. But amidst all the fear, there was something I had never truly known before: hope. It was fragile, but it was there. I had hoped that I could build a new life, that I could leave behind the man I had been and step into the woman I was becoming. And with that hope came a quiet but undeniable strength. I wasn't just running away anymore. I was running toward something, toward freedom, toward a life where I wasn't defined by the chains of my past. The night of my escape, Amir drove me to the airport. The long road there felt like an eternity, every second stretched out in agonizing silence. My hands were sweaty, my stomach in knots, but I couldn't turn back. Not now. Not after everything I had endured. The lights of Kuwait faded in the rearview mirror, and I knew that once I boarded that plane, I was saying goodbye not just to my family, but to the life I had once known. We arrived at the airport under the cover of darkness, and Amir helped me through the lines, his calm presence guiding me through the chaos. My heart thudded in my chest as I approached the gate, the fake passport in my hand. I had to act natural. I had to pretend to be someone else entirely. But inside, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice. One wrong move, one misstep, and I could be caught. The fear gripped me like a vice. As I stood in line, waiting to board, I couldn't help but think of the last time I had been at this airport, the last time I had looked at the city from above. I had dreamed of leaving, of escaping the life that had been forced upon me. Now, as the plane was ready to take off, I realized that I was finally free, not just physically, but spiritually. The boarding gate opened, and I stepped forward, my breath held tight in my chest. The immigration officer glanced at my passport, his face unreadable. He didn't say anything. He just nodded, stamped my document, and handed it back to me. My legs nearly gave out beneath me, but I walked forward, past the gate and into the plane, my heart still pounding in my chest. As the plane ascended into the night sky, I looked out the window at the city below, shrinking as we rose higher. I was leaving Kuwait behind, leaving my family, leaving the life I had known. And yet, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel empty. I felt a strange peace settle over me. I was no longer a prisoner of my past. I was no longer bound by the fear of what others might do to me. I was free. The flight to Rizal felt like the longest journey of my life. It wasn't just the distance or the time that stretched on, it was the weight of what I was leaving behind. I thought of my brothers, of my father, of everything I had known. I thought of my mother, who I had always tried to please, and wondered if she would ever understand why I had left. But despite the doubts, despite the fear of the unknown, I knew one thing: I had made the right choice. I had chosen life, even when death seemed the only option. I had chosen faith over fear, truth over silence, and hope over despair. When the plane touched down in Rizal, I couldn't believe it. I was alive. I was free. I had crossed a threshold, and I knew that this was only the beginning of my new life. In the days that followed, I was taken in by a small Christian community. They gave me a place to stay, food to eat, and most importantly, they gave me the love and support I had never known before. They didn't ask questions. They didn't judge. They simply accepted me, as I was, with all my scars and all my brokenness. And it was there, in that small, quiet community, that I began to heal. It wasn't instant. It wasn't easy. I still had nightmares, still woke up in the middle of the night, feeling the weight of the sand on my chest. But I was no longer alone. I had found a new family, one built not on blood or tradition, but on love, grace, and the truth of who I had become. In the quiet moments, when the memories of my past seemed too much to bear, I would remind myself of the light I had found in the grave. I wasn't buried to die. I was buried to be born again. About everyone who was still being buried in silence. Some people believe immediately when they hear my testimony. Others don't. I've been called a liar, exaggerated, disturbed, and that's okay. I understand. If someone told me they were buried alive and came back to life after finding Jesus, I would doubt it, too. But the one who lived, that was me. I know what I felt in that grave. I know what I heard, what I saw, what held me when my body no longer had strength. I don't tell this story to cause astonishment nor to seek attention. I tell it because someone needs to hear it. Because maybe there is another woman right now in this exact moment, hiding a Bible among clothes, wondering if it's worth continuing. Maybe there is someone feeling emotionally, spiritually buried, thinking there is no way out anymore. And I am here to say there is. There is a name that crosses the darkness. A name that needs no microphone, no pulpit, no human authorization. He enters even the sand. He enters even death. What I live today isn't a fairy tale. I still have fear sometimes. I still wake up in the middle of the night with memories that paralyze me. I still have anxiety attacks, scars that aren't visible. I lost my family. I lost my country. I lost everything I knew. But I gained something that no one can ever take from me again. I gained the certainty that I am not alone. And this certainty moves me. Miss Rosa still visits me from time to time. When she looks me in the eyes, we both know the price of that decision she made to hand me that New Testament. And yet, she never said she regretted it. She says she prayed for 3 years before giving me that book. And that now she understands why. Because I wasn't buried to die. I was buried to be born again. 2 years after I managed to escape, I received a message on an old profile I still kept hidden on social media. It was from my younger brother, Yusef. He wrote just one sentence. "Are you alive?" My heart almost jumped out of my mouth. I took days to answer. I was afraid. Afraid of being tracked. Afraid of getting hurt again. Afraid of deluding myself thinking he wanted to see me alive. But I answered, and to my surprise he told me he knew everything. That he saw when my father invented the story that I had run away with a woman. He said he stayed silent because he was afraid. That he saw me alive that night. Saw me breathe for the last time and did nothing. And that this haunted him ever since. I cried a lot reading that. I told him I forgave him even without knowing if he would believe it. He replied, "I believe in Jesus now too, but I can't talk to you. They watch me." After that, he deleted the profile. I never had contact again. But I know the seed germinated there, too. Sometimes when I speak about all this, people ask me if I would go back, if I could choose. Would I have refused the Bible? Would I have closed my eyes, lived my normal life, and maybe still be with my family? It's a difficult question because it hurts. It still hurts. But even with everything, even with what I lived, with what I lost, with the trauma I still carry, the answer is no. I wouldn't go back because I found the one who never left me alone, even in my own grave. And if today I can tell this, it's because he brought me back. Not just to live, but to testify. I am living proof that Jesus' love reaches even the places where no one else wants to enter. Even the deserts where they bury people who love wrongly, even the silences no one dares to break. Sometimes I ask myself why he chose me, why he took me out of that grave when so many other people die without having the chance to return. I have no answer. I have no supernatural explanation nor a perfect theory. All I can say is that it happened and that to this day when I close my eyes I can still hear the sand falling on my face and at the same time feel that presence that told me you are not alone. Some people call this a delusion. Others call it a miracle. I call it real because it was because I died and returned. And if I returned, it wasn't to live hidden. It was to tell. To tell that there is a God who enters the grave with you, who finds you in the dark, and who gives you a new life, even when everyone has already given you up for death. I keep going, one day at a time. It's not always easy. But when I get quiet, when everything seems to come back, when memory tightens, I remember that someone called me by name when no one else recognized me. I remember that someone saw me when everyone turned their faces away. And that is enough for me. And that is why I am here telling all this now. Because it may be that on the other side of the screen, someone is in this same hole, feeling the weight without air, without a way out. And I want to say there is a way out. And it doesn't depend on strength, nor on religion, nor on merit. It has a name, Jesus. And he still does the impossible. Still today, still now. I am proof of that. And as much as everything ended that night, somehow that was where my life began. After everything I lived, I learned that no one is buried too deep for Jesus to rescue. He found me where no one else could. And if he did that with me, he can do it with you too. Now, I want to ask you, what was the moment in your life when you felt most alone? Have you gone through something that seemed to have no way out? Share it here in the comments. I will read each one with care. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the next videos. Every week, I bring real testimonies that show that miracles still happen. And if you love this type of content and want to help this channel reach even more lives, click the join button. With this you support this mission of spreading faith and hope to the world and also get access to exclusive content. Now click on the video appearing on your screen because in it I tell another testimony that will also deeply move you. Stay with God and see you in the next.